Ayan, mag-meta alive tayo ng konti. Kakatapos yung lecture natin. I just finished a 3-hour plus lecture kanina dun sa Philippine Strategic History beginning with 7 Years War. So, pwede niyo check sa baba na repost ko yan dun sa lecture ko sa PUP. So, ngayon, I thought maybe I'll have a little bit of time quite shortly to discuss yung mga latest sa ating politika. At sana naman meron tayong time for posting dyan sa TikTok. No? So, sa pagkaalam nyo, since last week, Friday, I think, nag-post na ako ng first explainer on TikTok. And not bad. So, tingnan natin. Hopefully, we can be more active on TikTok soon and discuss more issues, no? Yung mga 1 minute to 5 minutes discussion, no? Ng issues in a rapid fire way siguro or not so rapid fire. So yun, hindi ako nagsasayaw, hindi ako alam mo naman, di ba? Yun ang concern ko paano ako mag-TikTok na still you keep your dignity, right? I mean, I'm talking about my role, of course. I mean, of course, everyone is free to dance and all of that. I'm just saying in my case, I was just wondering about it. So mga explainers hopefully can work. So please follow me also on TikTok. The same name, Richard Haydarian. I think Richard Haydarian 007 yung aking account. So, well, diba? Alam mo na. At dami rin mga meta dyan sa TikTok. Ano kayang term ko sa mga meta sa TikTok? Basta, maraming mga talky-talk doon sa ano rin. Mga galit ka agad, no? Basta hindi mo lang maano. But very alive. So, thank you very much dun sa mga nag-follow rin sa akin sa TikTok at yung mga nag-respond, reply at nakiki-meta sa mga meta dun sa mga comment sections. That's always good to have a discussion. That's really what we want to have informed, intelligent discussion. Gayahin ko yung mga ibang vloggers na umiinom habang may mga, anong tawag ko dyan, mga pa-reality show style na kunyari parang everything is just mundane. Pero kita niyo, wala na yung boses ko, di ba? So yeah, I have to drink a little bit. Balikan natin itong issue na yan. So what am I gonna talk about? Medyo break muna tayo sa Marcos, Tata, yung mga gano'n, medyo na, I think na, hindi naman naumay, na sobra na yata siguro yung mga conversations natin sa kanila. Let's go back naman, pag-usapan natin si LENI. Yan, si LENI pag-usapan natin. If I'm not mistaken, was it last Friday or something like that na may malaking issue kay LENI because dun sa sinabi niya nung kasama niya yung military to put it in British way, parang she said something about yung anti-communist task force ng AFP, no, na was perceived as like LENI kind of like okay with it. I have to double check yung exact quotes from LENI. I saw a lot online, pero parang kapos pa I have to dig in more into that. And I think there was a disappointment by a lot of progressives, a lot of good friends of mine, a lot of people I respect, na parang concern nila is may mga militarist element in the LENI camp who are pro a supposedly red tagging institution or pro a kind of a rabid anti-communist task force, something like that. I'm not saying that is what the task force is. After all, the AFP has to protect the country from domestic and external threats. But the interpretation was that LENI, was either not progressive enough, or LENI was trying to kind of carry favor with the military. So medyo grabing negative yung comments kay LENI over the past few days. Hindi na ako nag-comment kasi ayoko naman yung jump ka kagad sa issue at may masasabi ka. Lalo sa Twitter kasi grabe din doon, mas grabe pa doon, like so I wanted to make sure that this is not just virtue signaling by some people, and at the same time also make sure that the other side has a chance to explain themselves. I don't know. I mean, this is a very complicated issue. At ito lang masabi ko. Okay. I believe that all leaders, all presidential candidates of whatever stripe, they have to be held accountable and they have to be clear about what they stand for. So, just because mas gusto mo itong candidate than the other, hindi pwedeng bibigyan mo ng free pass. So, naniwala ako na lahat dapat bigyan mo ng, proper scrutiny. So, if LENI indeed make a statement or made a policy position na hindi tugma dun sa kanyang mga convictions, dun sa kanyang policy proposals, at saka mga prinsipyo ng kanyang partido, then pag-usapan dapat yan. Yan yung cousin natin, Marco, cousin, wait lang, tapusin ko muna dyan. So dyan, mga friends from Ibiza. Balikan natin yan. So yeah, I believe that, all candidates have to be held accountable. At the same time, I don't like virtue signaling. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but I'm just saying, ayoko yung virtue signaling, yung mga pa-purist effect na naghanap lang ng konting medyo mali or konti lang hindi progressive attacking kaagad, tapos yung cancel culture, ganun. Medyo hindi ako 100% sangayon dyan because Twitter is not where you get nuance, right? And a lot of people are just there to bash some politicians or make themselves look more progressive or whatever, or try to cancel the politicians or try to portray politicians as trapo, mga walang prinsipyo, ganun. So, yun lang. I just want to make sure na hindi ganito na. At the same time, of course, you have to also understand the context. LENI was with the military, right? And that brings me to the larger issue I want to raise here. No? For me, yes, we have to hold everyone accountable. We shouldn't just make sure na purong virtue signal lang ginagawa natin. But dito kasi sa issue ng military, kasi when it comes to LENI, I think, you have to assess her. I don't want to use the word judge kasi parang hindi na political correct. You have to assess her based on what she has done over the past 5-6 years or more, right? At klaro naman yung stance ni LENI, despite against all odds, despite all the harassment, etc. In fairness to her, she opposed excesses, she opposed policy excesses, she opposed human rights violations, she opposed red tagging, all of the troubling things we have seen throughout the years. She has opposed authoritarian nostalgia. So I think medyo unfair naman na you will judge a person by a statement they made in a specific context or so. At the same time, let me be very clear. I think it's very, very important for LENI to also clarify where she stands on this issue, right? Because obviously LENI is, not condoning, diba? Red tagging, etc. Let's be fair, right? At the same time, she has to be clear about what she would do dun sa issue ng communist insurgency if she becomes the next president, right? So I think that's a very important thing for her to do. The same, of course, we have to also not forget that you don't win elections and you don't beat demagogues and authoritarian nostalgia with purist politics. You have to have what I call principled pragmatism. And having the military, right? The military is a very important element of our democracy. And it's important that the military, right, will not be politicized, will not intervene in major events, including elections. And I think a lot of these elements, a lot of these considerations have to be included in any understanding of what LENI says in specific context or what she said in this case, right? Gets yung sinasabi ko, di ba? So what I'm saying is that instead of just going out there and just bashing a politician for a statement or two that may not be in consonance with what you believe she believes in or what you believe in, and now you're suddenly questioning that maybe she's not really committed to that, I think you have to understand that bigger context, right? But at the same time, I think you have to give chance to LENI to clarify her position, and I think LENI has to clarify her position. So I think it's not only enough for LENI to say na she's against red tagging and be consistent on that in both rhetoric and action, but also I think it would be good if the LENI comes out and also give us more idea about what will be their policy if they're in government on the issue of communist insurgency, right? And how to make sure legitimate counterinsurgency or legitimate national security policies are not, right? Hindi sila biglang diba? Kung saan-saan pumupunta at hindi yung mga red tagging, mga ganyan-ganyan. So I think that's what we have to keep in mind. So for me naman, maybe we should give time to the vice president to clarify her point. And I'm not saying this because I'm pro or against someone else. I told you, diba? Even with Bongbong Marcos, diba? I think when it comes to Bongbong Marcos, he has to be given time to clarify also what he wants for the country in terms of actual policy proposals. Hindi lang yung Ferdinand Marcos Jr. siya, no? So he has to explain. So I think all of our leaders, well before hopefully yung debates na yung mga presidential debates next year, already give us more extensive interviews and discussions. So hopefully mag-meta alive din sila to explain sa atin where do they stand on these very sensitive issues and also very crucial issues. So ganun naman talagang position ko. If I believe that Bongbong Marcos has to be given a chance and he has to come out and when I say given a chance, not given a chance, na you don't. Anyways, you know what I mean? Like, all candidates have to be given a chance and they should proactively also explain their policy position, right? Especially on sensitive issues. And I think dito kay LENI, ganun din. Dapat dito sa issue ng red tagging, you have to give her a chance to clarify what she meant with certain statements she made last week. And, for her to also give us an idea what kind of presidency she would have and what kind of approach she's going to have to counter insurgency without condoning or without facilitating or without turning a blind eye to some serious concerns over red tagging. So yun lang. Yun lang naman para sa akin. Diba? Anyways, meron ba kayong questions? I'm gonna be very quick kasi magpahinga na ako, sorry. Nakita na, I just finished a 3-hour plus the exercise. Sobrang pagod na ako. But I just thought I have to get this out. Talagang kailangan get out. Thank you dyan sa mga nagbibigay ng star. Yan, pwede na tayo bumili ng dyan. Mamaya pag may endorsement. Pili tayo ng ganito, mga drinks, mga ganun. wala pa tayo sa level na yan. Yung mga, sa mga nagbibigay, ganun. Wala pa tayo dyan. Yeah. Kamusta kayo dyan? Nako, baka maano tayo dyan. Nako. Parang biglang ngayon, ako rin biglang parang, wala, no comment rin ako eh. This is very, alam mo, ang stance ko talaga, ito if you want to deal with insurgency, go to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is social injustice, legitimate grievance of a lot of people on the ground, right? And corruption within key institutions of the state. Go back to the root of the problem. Yun ang kailangan natin if you want to end insurgency. Because there's no military solution here. There's no force alone cannot solve this issue. What we have to do is to go to the root of the problem. No? At yung root of the problem here is yung kalagayan nating, our countrymen dyan sa, in the look at where insurgencies tend to come up. They tend to come up in areas whereby you have high levels of inequality, grabbing levels of oppression, grabbing levels of poverty, yung abuso by people in positions of power, etc. So a lot of people are being, driven into desperation, and some people join, resistance groups or join insurgency groups or join, extremist groups. No, so that is what we have to look at here. No. Ano yung root ng problem? At yun ang pag-usapan natin. And I believe that is where the AFP, Philippine National Police, our leadership, all of them have to work together to make sure that we deal with the root of the problem. Yun ang talagang aking stance dito sa issue na yan. And to be fair, I have talked to some top military officials, and including a former AFP top general who agree with me on this. No, they also agree na you have to go back to the root of the problem and deal with the social grievances that give birth to these insurgencies, right? And para sa akin, of course, mahalaga na we end these insurgencies in the best way possible, because it also allows us to have more resources to deal with external security issues. Grabe yung threat na face natin dyan sa West Philippines. Kung tuloy-tuloy insurgency and problem domestically, how can you focus there? How can you invest in your Navy, in your Air Force, your external security capabilities? So, mahalaga talaga we deal with this. And we deal with this in a most progressive and sustainable way. And the issue of, insurgency, etc., it is a domestic security issue. So, yung AFP kasi, ilang taon na, ilang dekada na yung AFP is so, absorbed by these internal wars when their role is to be guardians of the republic against external security threats, right? So hopefully we can make the situation much better through progressive policies and dealing with the source of the grievances, etc., with corruption, malgovernance, misgovernance, inequality, oppression, widespread poverty, etc. Once we do that, hopefully, then these issues can be handled more by police, by local government units, etc. Yun yung dapat goal natin sa issue niyan. So I think sana yun ang i-raise more ng ating candidates, no, in terms of a sustained long-term solution to this. So there's no purely military solution. So force alone is not gonna solve this problem. Kitang-kita natin yan. Ang tagal na, di ba? Dekada after dekada after dekada. But other than that, let me tell you this. It's also in the AFP where I've seen, many, countless patriots. People are disciplined. People are very aware of problems in the country and the grievances in the country. And I'm sure they will welcome a progressive and decisive leader who will really deal with the sources of the grievances of the problem, right? And, in fairness to AFP, despite all of the limitations they have faced throughout the years, etc., they have also they have been doing a lot to also defend our interests at saka yung protektahan yung ating karagatan dyan sa West Philippine Sea and mga others. So let's be fair to them. Yung ating Marines, yung ating troops dyan sa Ayungin, dyan sa Pag-asa, grabe yung dinadaanan nila just to defend our rights, no? So let's also be fair, in that sense, and acknowledge a lot of these good things. So that's why I think this is the level of discussion we should have. At yun ang hindi medyo wala tayo on social media, etc. Yun lang masasabi ko. Alright, may question ba kayo dyan before tatakas na ako? Yan. Wala, nag-star masyado. Parang hindi niya ata gustong topic. Gusto niya ata sila Bongbong ang pag-usapan natin ng tatay, no? Yung si Lenny pinag-usapan natin, parang marami naman okay. Is there any country that has already completely solved insurgencies, bro? Yeah, many countries have ended their serious insurgencies. Wala nang insurgencies sa Indonesia, right? For a long time, they had that a lot of insurgency, including done sa Banda Aceh. Wala, tapos na. But of course, you can say the hurricane and a lot of that kind of contributed to that, yung tsunami. But still, Vietnam, more or less, right? There's no significant insurgency. Even Malaysia, they used to have a communist insurgency. Wala na. So, we can cite a lot of countries where they had serious insurgencies and all, they resolved it. Colombia has moved towards that direction. A little bit my setbacks recently, but in the past decade, there has been a movement in the direction, no? Kung saan, peace process with the FARC, etc., was pushed at least by a former president. So we can cite a lot of countries that have been moving in that right direction. Back in the days, lahat ng bansa meron insurgency because hindi pa established yung estado. In fact, when you have insurgencies and all of that, ibig sabihin, may pagkakulang dun sa state building process, sa nation building process, may problema dun sa sistema, right? That is what you have to look at, right? So maraming bansa na successful today are the countries who were able to end this insurgency, and in many cases, they ended it not just by force, but actually by going to the roots of the problem, right? Addressing the grievances. Legitimate grievances that drive insurgencies. So if titignan mo yung mga bansa na tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung mga insurgencies, the longest insurgencies in the world, whether India, whether Philippines, whether some Latin American countries, whether some of the countries in Africa, Middle East, ito yung mga bansa kung saan corrupt yung institutions, kung saan walang good leadership masyado, especially on the ground, in certain areas, in certain peripheral areas. In a lot of cases, there was a purely force-based approach without much, community-based development approach. So it didn't work, right? So yun ang masasabi natin. So if you look comparatively, a lot of countries whereby they have much more just political system, when corruption is very low, inequality is very low, at nagkakaroon ng more and more development dun sa probinsya, sa mga peripheries of country, there you see that insurgencies are really on a downward trajectory. Now, in countries, in our neighborhoods, like Thailand, for instance, in the south, where, economic conditions are much worse than the rest of the country, whereby there's military and force use, whereby there are ethnic, religious differences, then tuloy-tuloy insurgency. So, yun ang dapat talagang we keep in mind when we discuss these issues, right? But in the meantime, of course, we have national security needs, right? But that's not an excuse for red tagging or, etc. Kaya nga dapat very clear yung guardrails mo dun sa batas, dun sa policy, dun sa implementing rules and regulation, at saka yung leadership mo, dapat conscientious, meticuloso, no? Para hindi magkaroon ng abuses, no? At the same time, sufficient efficiency and effectiveness to ensure also national security is upheld. You can always have a balance. I believe, look at a lot of successful countries around the world, like Japan, South Korea, Germany, etc. They have been able to strike a pretty good balance between political freedoms and national security. Or even Taiwan, even though under threat siya, by China, etc. They have kept a very vibrant democracy. And Taiwan is just across, right? The Luzon Strait. So I think I don't believe in this argument that it's either or. It's like, pag may freedom, walang security, or you can only get security by being tough and all. I don't believe in that. It's just not backed by evidence. Anyone who says that, they don't know what they're talking about, and they should not be in a position of power to begin with, right? So yun. Yeah, good governance is the solution. Good leadership is the solution, and also proper dialogue, reaching out to communities on the ground, listening to them, listening to their sources of grievances. Yun ang kailangan natin dyan, right? Because that's how you defeat hardliners. That's how you defeat extremism. Whenever there is injustice, there is resistance, and resistance can take many forms, right? Sometimes it could be democratic, it could be political, and sometimes it can get more extreme, right? And sometimes when the situation is very desperate, it becomes more extreme, right? So that is why we have to go to the root of the problem. Yun talagang solution natin. And I think it's very important for our politicians and our leaders to explain it to the people. Walang shortcut dito. Hindi mo masosolve itong issue overnight. And in fairness to President Duterte, when it comes to the Mindanao issue, we're done with the Bangsamoro referendum. So hopefully yung mga next administrations ay tuloy-tuloy din yung support for Bangsamoro. But we also deal with some of the grievances that led to the rise of certain extremist groups in the past. No? So yun lang. So hindi lang communism, mga ganun pinag-usapan natin, but all sorts of insurgencies and sources of domestic insecurity. Human security, yeah. Human security is something that we have to talk about, yeah. Alright, okay. I'll keep it there. Thank you very much. Let me get a little bit more rest and then balikan natin yan. So I just wanted to make a short catch-up. Baka na-miss nyo naman ako Sabi ko baka hindi na ako na-miss ng mga to kailan ba yung last natin? Last Thursday, ganon? So yun. Hopefully na-miss nyo ako at hopefully we had some interesting discussion here. And tomorrow and coming days, pag-usapan natin yan. Balikan natin yung mga ibang topics. Marami pang nangyayari sa ating politika, no? But for now, I just wanted to give my 2 cents on this issue, right? Yun lang. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much. God bless.